Well, good day and welcome to another episode of The League of Biblical Enthusiasts. We have spent some time the last 6 months or so reviewing English translations of the Bible. How did they come about? Who were the men who translated them, the men and the women? Did someone authorize a translation? Did someone get together with a committee? Was it done by a single person? Yes, all of these questions have been answered in this series. But today we move on to a brand new series closely related to both English Bible translations and biblical archaeology. Because without a source text, you have nothing to translate from. In the case of the New Testament, we are working from Greek manuscripts, the language which produced the New Testament. Now, we look at different men and women who, beginning largely with the 19th century and continuing to today, who have searched and are searching for manuscripts of the New Testament, which will help aid in our understanding and to get us back as far as possible to the earliest form of the text. Today we begin with a young man named Robert Curzon. So sit back and enjoy for the next 15 minutes or so as we look at the first of our many manuscript hunters, the young fellow named Robert Curzon, brought to you by the League of Biblical Enthusiasts. Now, young Robert Curzon is our subject for today and perhaps for the next several weeks, as he had a fascinating life that we will discuss. Robert Curzon was born the 16th of March, 1810, and died at 63 years of age on the 2nd of August, 1873. He was an English traveler, a diplomat, an author, and manuscript hunter. He was responsible for acquiring important and late biblical manuscripts from Eastern Orthodox monasteries. He was educated at the Charterhouse, a very prestigious English school, and subsequently at Christ Church, Oxford, though he left early in 1831 and did not complete his degree. He entered the diplomatic service and became an attaché at Constantinople. He acted also for some time as a private secretary to the English ambassador in Turkey, through whose influence he obtained access to the various religious houses, convents, and monasteries in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East, houses which he so charmingly described in his travelogue, and from which he was enabled to bring to Europe many curious and valuable treasures and Greek manuscripts. During his quest for ancient manuscripts, he traveled through Egypt, Greece, Turkey, Syria, Palestine, Albania, and Armenia. His best-selling travel account was entitled Visits to Monasteries in the Levant. You can find it and read it on archive.org, and I encourage you to do so. It is a page turner. You would really enjoy it. And we will be quoting at length today and in a few other episodes from it. In his travels to Greece, Armenia, and the Middle East, he acquired manuscripts in Greek, in Coptic, in Syriac, Hebrew, in Aramaic, and even other languages. And when he died, more than 200 of his manuscripts were loaned to the British Museum and were eventually bequeathed to it in 1917 upon the death of his only daughter, Daria. This young Robert Curzon came from a very wealthy background and attended the very finest of schools. At 23 years of age, he was privileged and bored. He wrote The solitariness of my existence is unimaginable. It's like living in a madhouse. And he lived during a time where there was an increasing awareness of the mystery and treasures of the East. Reports from travelers whetted his appetite for adventure, for those unexplored antiquities. So since he had the interest, the money, the means, and opportunity, he set off for adventure at 23 years of age for the Eastern Mediterranean. As we said, it was then called the Levant. His first trip began in 1823. He visited Greece, Turkey, and Egypt, and during this trip, he visited monasteries and collected manuscripts. He then made a second trip to Mount Athos and the Middle East in 1837. Indeed, between the years 1833 and 1838, he spent half of those years exploring in the Middle East. He was especially interested in Mount Athos, an important center of Greek Orthodox monasticism, where he believed there were several valuable manuscripts. Curzon continued to travel and collect manuscripts throughout the 1840s. He visited more monasteries in places such as Palestine, Syria, and Egypt. And as we said, he documented these travels in exquisite detail in what has become a famous travelogue, Visits to Monasteries in the Levant. It was published in 1849. So let's study this travel diary and mine it for the most important aspects for our purposes. The principal achievements described in this travel diary are threefold. Number one, his account of explorations and manuscripts found in the monasteries of the Nitrian Desert in Egypt. Secondly, the libraries and the monasteries of Meteora. And thirdly, those libraries and manuscripts found in Mount Athos in Greece. So let's begin with his visit to the Nitrian Desert in Egypt. The Nitrian Desert is a desolate region in northwestern Egypt, lying between Alexandria and Cairo, west of the Nile Delta. It's known for its history of Christian monasticism. In 1828, Lord Prudhoe, British naval commander and explorer, saw the spectacle of an oil cellar in the Suriani monastery, littered 2 feet deep with manuscript leaves. And some communication of this discovery no doubt was made to Curzon before 1837, and he determined to see that oil cellar at all costs. And see it, he did. He wrote about this discovery in his travel diary in a section he entitled The Blind Abbot of Suriani. And so now we'll begin some reading from his travel diary. So please be patient. I think you'll enjoy it. He says, "In the evening, I returned to Suriani, where I was hospitably received by the abbot and 14 or 15 Coptic monks. In the morning, I went to the church and all the other wonders of the place, and on making inquiries about the library, I was conducted by an old abbot who was blind and who was constantly accompanied by another monk into a small upper room in the great square tower, where we found several Coptic manuscripts." Now, side note, Coptic language manuscripts of the New Testament are some of the earliest and most important witnesses of the New Testament we possess. And Coptic is a language written using the Greek alphabet with 7 additional letters borrowed from Demotic writing that represents the sound unique to Egyptian. See here on the left side of the page is a Greek manuscript, and on the right beside it is a Coptic manuscript. I think you can see the similarity between the two. Almost 1,000 Coptic manuscripts of the New Testament survived into the 21st century. Now, let's go back to Curzon's account where they had just found several Coptic manuscripts. He continues, "Most of these were lying on the floor, but some were placed in niches in the stone wall. They were all on paper except 3 or 4. One of these was a superb manuscript of the Gospels, with commentaries by the early fathers of the church, and 2 others were doing duty as coverings to a couple of large pots, open pots, and jars, which had been containing preserves, long since evaporated. I was allowed to purchase these vellum manuscripts as they were considered to be useless by the monks, principally, I believe, because they were no more preserves in the jars. The old blind abbot had solemnly declared there were no other books in the monastery besides those which I had already seen. But I had been told by a French gentleman at Cairo that there were many ancient manuscripts in the monk's oil cellar, and I was in pursuit of these and the Coptic dictionary that I had undertaken for the journey to the Natron Lakes. The abbot positively denied the existence of these books, and we retired from the library to my room with the Coptic manuscripts, which they had ceded to me without difficulty, and which, according to the dates contained in them, and from their general appearance, may claim to be considered among the oldest manuscripts in existence, more ancient certainly than many of the Syriac manuscripts, which I'm about to describe. The abbot, his companion, and myself sat down together. I produced a bottle of Rosoglio, which is liquor, from my stores, and I knew that all Oriental monks were partial, for though they do not, I believe, drink wine because of an excess of it it's considered forbidden by Scripture, yet ardent spirits not having been invented in those times, there's nothing said about them in the Bible. And at Mount Sinai and all the other spots of sacred pilgrimage, the monks comfort themselves with a little glass or rather small coffee cup of raw spirits, when nothing better of its kind can be procured. I've always found it to be invincible, and now we sat sipping our cups of the sweet pink Rosoglio and firing little compliments at each other, talking pleasantly over our bottle, till some time passed away, and the face of the blind abbot waxed bland and confiding, and he had that expression on his countenance which men wear when they are pleased with themselves and bear goodwill towards mankind in general. I had, by the by, a great advantage over the good abbot, as I could see the workings of his features and he could not see mine, or note my eagerness about the oil cellar, on the subject of which I again gradually entered. "There is no oil there," he said. "I am curious to see the architecture of so ancient a room," said I, "for I've heard that yours is a famous oil cellar." "It is a famous cellar," said the other monk. "Take another cup of Rosoglio," I said. "Let's go see it, and when we come back we will have another bottle, and I will give you a few more which I have brought with me for your private use." This last argument prevailed. We returned to the great tower, ascended the steep flight of steps which led to the door of its entrance. We then descended a narrow staircase to the oil cellar, a handsome vaulted room, where we found a range of immense vases. I discovered a narrow low door, and pushing it open, entered into a small closet, vaulted with stone, which was filled to the depth of 2 feet or more with the loose leaves of the Syriac manuscripts, which now form one of the chief treasures of the British Museum. Here I remained for some time, turning over the leaves and digging into manuscripts of loose vellum pages, by which exertions I raised such a cloud of fine pungent dust that the monks relieved each other in holding our only candle at the door, while the dust made us sneeze incessantly as we turned over the scattered leaves of vellum. I had extracted 4 books, the only ones which I could find which seemed to be tolerably perfect, when 2 monks who were struggling in the corner pulled out a great manuscript, a big one, of a brown and musty appearance and of prodigious weight, which was tied together with a cord. "Here is a box," exclaimed the 2 monks, who were nearly choked with the dust. "We have found a box, and a heavy one too." "A box!" shouted the blind abbot, who was standing in the outer darkness of the oil cellar. "A box! Where is it? Bring it out! Bring out the box! Heaven be praised! We have found the treasure! Lift up the box! Pull out the box! A box! A box! Sanduk! Sanduk!" shouted all the monks in various tones of voice. "Now then, let us see the box! Bring it out into the light!" they cried. "What can there be in it?" And they all came to help me carry it away up the stairs, the blind abbot following them to the outer door, leaving me to retrace my steps as I could with the volumes which I had dug out of their literary grave. Now, what manuscripts had he found? Well, we'll stop here and revisit that story in our next episode. We'll also cover the story of Curzon's trips to the monasteries of Meteora. I applaud your patience for this lengthy reading, and we may have a few more, but it's necessary, I think, to capture the excitement of these finds and the mystery surrounding them. If this video has been helpful to you and educational, then please like, subscribe, and share it with friends. There's so much more coming your way beginning next week, straight from the storehouse of the League of Biblical Enthusiasts.